So to those of you who are part of the call already, maybe you can type in the chat, where are you connecting from for this conversation? We really thank you for taking the time to be part of it. This is another round of our conversations with alumni and our GAIN platforms for peace and justice. This is part of the joint online activities that we are doing together with the Co-Scholars Program and the Global Alumni Initiative. And we seek to create space for very meaningful conversations to happen on the topics that our alumni are passionate about, they're interested in, where they see the opportunity to build peace and to also bring a critical and constructive perspective on different realities happening in the world. As you all know, today our topic is going to be about EndSARS in Nigeria, and to have a discussion about police brutality and discussing how our alumni see the situation, how this can be seen from a peace building perspective, and what are the possibilities for finding solutions for this current situation in the country. I think I'm gonna just give it one more minute to see if more people come, and then we will kick off. All of these conversations that we have been hosting up until now are all hosted by either our faculty of the Co-Scholar programs or our own alumni. So we are very happy that this is the case and that we have the opportunity to connect internationally. I will briefly share here about the Global Alumni Initiative. This is a very recent program of IofC USA that is bringing together all of our alumni from the Co-Scholars Program in Asia Plateau, in Switzerland, the Narrative Change Collaborative, as well as the Community Trust Building Fellowship. It is, as I shared beforehand, a platform. What we want is to provide a space for our alumni who are leaders in their own right to connect, to feel supported, to have the opportunity to continue doing their work in peace building and also community organizing and different forms in which that looks like locally. And we believe that this is a work that is done at 3 levels: personally, relationally, and at the systemic level. And we see this platform at the relational level to provide that connection and to support our alumni in the work that they do. And without further ado, I'm gonna give the floor to Dr. Carl Stoffer, our academic director of CSP Switzerland, to kick us off in today's session. Thank you so much, Carl, and to all of you for being part of this conversation. Carl, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eliana, and so good to be here. A warm welcome to each and everyone who has joined us, and we look forward to a rich and important conversation that we're having today. And I'm really, really honored to be able to moderate this session with 3 very important, distinguished panelists. And it's my privilege to be with them, and we're going to be looking forward to their input, each of them being engaged with this issue in different ways. First of all, it's a real pleasure to introduce Uche Agu. She was an alumni of our Asia Plateau program in 2014-2015. She's a skilled event production and exhibition industrial specialist, currently the CEO of Forte Events Limited and the COO of Zenith Exhibitions Limited. Uche, it's so great to have you. From your perspective, your work with entrepreneurship, your creativity, and your ability to listen and to hear the needs and then respond in innovative and powerful ways for positive change in the society. So glad you're with us. Following Uche will be Ofogbu Donald Akena, one of our graduates from the Co-Scholars Switzerland program in 2018. Akena is, first of all, a Nigerian, a husband and a father of 3 awesome boys. He is currently the project coordinator of the Henrik Bull Stiftung in Nigeria. His job role entails supporting, managing, and inspiring youth and youth civil society organizations around just governance, sustainable development, and inclusive growth. He is a trained teacher. So wonderful to have you, Donald, with us. And then finally, Mark, our third panelist, who was also part of our distinguished alumni from 2018 in Switzerland. And Mark works in the development sector, has a focus on energy access and the circular economy. He is also passionate about youth and governance, and a member of the strategic team of the Not Too Young to Run movement, which has successfully advocated for constitutional amendments and lowered the age of eligibility for elective offices in Nigeria. Incredibly important work. Mark is an analyst, a thinker, and someone who has used his incredible mind and energy to influence a lot of change in his country and in his surrounds. And so real privilege to have each one of you as part of our panel. And as has already been said, I am the academic director for the Co-Scholars program in Switzerland. And today, as you all know, we are here really to have a conversation around the issues of EndSARS in Nigeria, the protests against police brutality. And just as a few framing comments, and then I will be turning it over to our panelists, we really can't have this conversation unless we begin to talk about the origins and the history of policing and why in many different parts of the world, policing has become increasingly militarized and brutal, or over history has always been for certain populations and certain peoples. In Africa, talking about police and the organization of police and police brutality cannot be, that conversation cannot be had out of the context of the history of colonization and the fact that colonization set a precedent for structural violence in the way it handled the peoples of Africa. And so we need to begin at that point where the land was raped and the people were in many ways exploited in so many ways and brutalized, and began to understand that even though independence swept across the continent in the 1950s and 60s, and even some later, this is something we cannot ignore as affecting the current structures that we are challenged with today. And I speak as someone from the United States in the context of our movements here, Black Lives Movement, and our protests against police brutality, which many around the world have followed. We also are asking the same questions about the origins and the history of our own policing, which was in many ways set up to continue to keep our enslaved people's structures intact in this country. And so we need to begin to look at the racism that has been transmitted through that process. And we think of not necessarily police brutality alone, but in South Africa, the youth protests around fees must fall and roads must fall, and the call for a decolonization of the education. These are just to name a few, and these are important aspects of this movement. There's been a global demand by youth, and we know there's a youth bulge, especially in Africa, and that's a strange name. It's just a lot of youth, that age group that's moving across the continent, and is very important for our change and transformation, because it's the youth that no longer subscribe to some of the institutions that they have inherited, and understandably so. And so their call for just governance and institutional change is real, and it's important. So I want to end with this. Part of our goal in this whole discussion is not only to look back and to look at the present, to call out what needs to be called out for peace and justice purposes, but why we're here, because of initiatives of change in our work, is to ignite, hopefully, our imagination on how to build this transformed society, this transformed vision of a society that has the common good in mind. A society that says the government is there to serve the people, not the people to serve the government. And so on that note, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, and we'll start with Uche.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy seeing every one of us. Dr. Carl, thank you so much for that introduction. I really do appreciate it. And I thank you to IofC for this great initiative, particularly for us here in Nigeria to lend our voices and to let the world know what's happening here. So I'm going to be talking briefly on the history and the origin of SARS. The conversation we're going to have today centers on the EndSARS protest and the before and the after phases of this protest. So I'm going to be giving a brief introduction of what led to the establishment of SARS. Who are these people we refer to as SARS? What are their responsibilities and what are their goals and objectives? I'll start from the very beginning. So in the early 90s, southern Nigeria, in particular Lagos, we're having issues of armed robbers and bandits practically taking over the region, and the government had to act fast. So they created a special unit within the Nigerian police force called the Special Anti-Robbery Squad in 1992 to tackle issues relating to armed robbery, bandits, kidnapping, and other violent crimes. That was the basic responsibility of this unit that was created in 1992. So 10 years after their creation, SARS seemed to have succeeded in its aim. There was a recorded reduction or drastic reduction of armed robbery, and this was a good one. So by 10 years after, which was in 2002, this unit was now spread across the 36 states of Nigeria. Initially, it was in Lagos, which is the commercial capital. But after 10 years of success and 10 years of seeing good effect of this unit, it was now created in other 35 other states and the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria. So with this, the members of this unit became emboldened. Initially, they do not move around with guns. They don't go around with guns in public. They work in plain uniforms without any security. Their job was to handle undercover operations. That was basically their job. Undercover spies, undercover operations. They monitor suspects till they can apprehend them. So after 10 years, and they were spread to other states in the country, they became emboldened by this. Power has been given to them, and things began to dwindle for the worse. We started seeing cases of them carrying arms in public, which wasn't what used to be the case prior to this time. So they began carrying arms in public. We had cases of roadblocks. They began to block roads, extorting people for no just cause. And to them, it became a crime if you are a young man that looks successful. If you look successful, you become a suspect to them. So this was in the early 2000s when it started. So the people began to notice that the aim for these units, has changed. What they were created for has been abandoned, and they've started moving to a different thing entirely, which, began to go. They began going against human rights. We had cases of extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrest, unlawful detention of people. They just meet you, check your phones, harass you, arrest you, and you have to pay huge amounts of money to bail yourself, whether you're innocent or you're guilty. They do not want to know. So people believe that they were given power. The government gave them wings to fly after success was recorded in the first 10 years of their existence. And this power given to them, or this excess power given to them, became something that was being abused by these people. And the citizens, in particular, the youth, who were greatly and hugely affected, began to express their displeasure and their concerns on what these supposed protectors have turned out to be. So that's the history of SARS, the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, created to tackle armed robbery, kidnapping, and other serious crimes, which now dwindled or moved direction or changed their focus to harassment, brutality, unlawful arrest, human rights abuses, targeting young men. Their cells, if you go to these SARS police stations, if you go to their police cells, is overcrowded. And there were cases whereby it was recorded or it was shown that they subject inmates to torture, beating, sometimes shootings, and sometimes mock executions. So they moved from their original purpose to becoming a thorn on the flesh of the citizens, in particular the youth of Nigeria. So that's the introduction or the history or the origin of how SARS came to be and how they changed direction.
Thank you, Uche. Very helpful. And we'll be moving on to Donald here in just a bit. I just want to intervene to say, anyone who has questions, please feel free to enter those questions into the chat. We will be having a Q&A time for about 20 minutes at the end of our panel discussion. And so we will now turn over to Akena. Donald Akena, you have the floor.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Cal. Uche, thank you very much for laying down the foundation. And I really want to thank everyone for joining in this, I would say, movements for a better Nigeria, peace and security. I think sometimes I find myself torn in the middle when talking about the EndSARS protest, because I kind of like see everybody as a victim in this case. And I tried to really ask myself, what exactly are the youth saying? And then what exactly is the police also hearing, or how does he understand what it's been presented to him? I think one of the biggest problems with Nigeria is we have huge structural issues. We have situations where poverty has been weaponized, ignorance has been weaponized, religion has been weaponized. We're still trying to find trust within the system. And for survival, a lot of people have actually seen the military as that channel through which they could actually make a living legally or illegally, or just have that sense of power, really. It's almost, it's really rare to find one or two police officers that will tell you, oh, I'm doing this job because I love it. So it's most likely you get into the police force either because you just like that feeling of I have a gun and people are scared of me, or I'm a police officer just because I can't find a job. It's really, really rare. I think it was only recently that I was able to find a little boy that, after passing his secondary school exam, says, I actually want to be a policeman when I grow up. I want to be able to protect lives. But that kind of narrative is not something you see everywhere. On the average, sensing, if you sense an average Nigerian person, so for instance, if you take me as one of your sample, I would rather prefer to driving at 6 p.m. I would rather prefer to drive through a very, very dark, alley, a dark road, drive through that dark road than take a street with lights and then I see policemen just in the middle. So a lot of Nigerians would actually avoid policemen. You don't feel safe around them, and then you really have to reset your brain, your mind, the minute the police officer pulls you off, because it's about empathy and it's about approach. There's no such thing as being professional. There's no such thing as, getting a warning for breaking a traffic rule. At the first instance, you're either reaching for your pockets or you're reaching for your heart, or you're just, you're scared, there's a scare. And this is not because people just hate the police. I mean, they are families, they are friends, they are neighbors, but there's a fear and a mistrust that comes with them. And it's as a result of the frequency of abuse, the frequency of mistrust, the harassment, the detentions and the rest of them, that we have witnessed over time. Nobody wants to get into a police case. You don't want to even go to a police station to bail anybody. You don't want to pick up somebody that is knocked down from a road, because they may say, oh, he's responsible, and you get arrested, So it's we avoid the police because of this kind of mistrust. And with the whole SARS incidents, there've been a huge number of cases, terrible, real terrible cases, nightmares you really don't want to imagine. And some of the cases I'll read out are cases that are in print media, they're in public media, they're in public space. Some of these stories are stories that have been shared in the judicial inquiry that is actually going on as a result of the EndSARS protest. A lot of them you'll find from the report of Amnesty International. Just a quick Google search, you would see a lot of horrific stories, and a lot of these things have continued because they have been unattended to. It's kind of like allowed. The governments in power, now I'm not talking about these governments, it's the systemic thing historically, from colonial days down to the military rule we've been in. So it's been that trend. A lot of these things are spillovers from colonial to the military rule, down to democracy, be it APC, be it PDP, whatever government that is in power, people are afraid of airing their view. People are afraid of, talking about the government. You're really, really cautious about what you want to say. You write the post and you want to edit it 4 or 5 times because you're not sure of who would knock on your door. So these things are there, and there's a lot of fear. We don't have that sense of democracy because of apprehension. Some of the instances we've seen, sometime in mid-May 1996, we heard of a story of where 2 security guards were actually killed by they were arrested by SARS operators, over alleged crime. And after they were arrested, nobody heard anything about them. They were never taken to court. And sometime back in 1997, sometime in January 1997, after a year, their bodies were found in a mortuary. How did they get there? How were they killed? Nothing. In October 2005, we also had a SARS operative that actually killed a taxi driver somewhere in Delta State over his refusal to actually pay a bribe. And he was not taken to court, nothing of that. There was no charge. He was killed. In 2009 also, we also had several cases of SARS members that actually infiltrated some supposed university students and charged them over cases of crime, under the guise of, internet frauds. We also saw a lot of cases that have been reported from Amnesty International in 2010. There's a terrible case somewhere in Port Harcourt where a particular young boy was actually beaten with the butt of the gun and iron belts, where they actually accused him of being an armed robber. So many of these cases, they never saw a court. They were never tried. They were never reporting. Even when we hear instances of, the police commissioners come up and say, oh, these cases will be investigated, nobody could follow through. You never see the faces. In fact, I think the judicial inquiry that is actually going on in Lagos, the lawyers that were actually representing SARS, they said many of the police officers that were alleged associated with many of these extrajudicial killings, a lot of them could not be brought to the judicial inquiry. None of them could answer for their cases, basically. So people don't see, we don't believe we'll be able to get access to justice. Sometime in March 2017, a 23 years old a Miracle, it's a young boy around 23, was also detained by SARS officers, was arrested somewhere in Anambra State, southeastern part of Nigeria. He was accused of stealing a laptop. After that, he was tortured. He was not given food during 40 days of his tortures. He was never detained. By the time he was being taken to court, he had sustained major injuries and fractures. In October 2018, another 24 years old boy, Sunday Abang, who was actually trying to be an amateur boxer. That was his, his ambition, but he was also arrested by SARS official who accused of robbery. He was detained for 5 weeks, couldn't reach his family, couldn't reach his friends, couldn't reach medical workers. He was, beaten, he sustained major injuries. There were lots of fractures. I mean, a lot of people that you would actually say are missing persons. A lot of them were picked up by police officers. It's really, really horrific and scary. Sometime in 2016 also, Amnesty International reported 15 cases where SARS officials have actually confiscated people and properties without any trial or feedback on information. We also heard of cases somewhere in Akwa Ibom, where a fisherman and a pastor were also allegedly killed by men of SARS. In Anambra State also, we've also seen a report on a particular SARS operative that his name actually came up with like 90% of many of these extrajudicial killings, no investigation. In one instances, he would, promotions. I mean, this is like they kill people and they get promoted, and there's no investigation, nothing. So we don't know how we actually got to these junctions. And during the EndSARS protest that happened this year, I think we still saw a lot of that extrajudicial killing. The impunity that comes with it exhibits itself also. So in October 2018, Mr. Sunday Abang also, like I said, he actually sustained major fractures, and there are numerous cases from stealing, from kidnap. A lot of these policemen are totally unidentifiable. You cannot identify them by anything because they are totally on mufti. It's been a terrible case, a sad case, and there's really no difference on whether you're a man or whether you're a woman. It's just like that. We've had instances where young boys actually go out for parties, they are picked up. We'd have issues of celebrities actually complaining of same instances of extrajudicial arrest. And it's really been a nightmare for a lot of Nigerian young people. By 11 p.m., you want to be at home. You're looking good, you have an iPhone, you have a laptop, you'll most likely be picked up. So a lot of these instances have really brought so much worry and scare. And it's been replicated in everything we see today. After the EndSARS protests, reactions have been terrible. And I think within all of these things, we still can't place it on just individuals. It's also a systemic issues. I have a lot of policemen who are my friends. During the EndSARS protests, I have police officers who call me and say, look, don't come around this area, it's violent, it's hot, stay safe and all of that. And I sit down with these people and I ask them. I think during the first protest that happened somewhere in Bega, not too far from my office, I was actually with a policeman and I was asking him, what do you think about the EndSARS protest? And his reaction was also his reaction was like, the citizens don't also understand them. We don't know what they go through. He asked me I should look at his office and look at his working condition. He doesn't have good working conditions. Their living standard is poor. Training facility is poor. Salaries may not come on time. I mean, his office was like in a container, like a 12-foot container. The condition is hot. They don't have water. They don't have service cars. And he actually asked me, he said, if crime is actually happening like 10 kilometers away, do you really think I would be able to attend to that crime? Where's the car? Where's the salaries? Where's the improvements in his living standard to serve as a police officer? So he's making me understand that he's also on the edge. His living condition as a human being, it's also unbearable. He tells you he's standing under the sun, he's controlling traffic for 7 hours, 8 hours, and then how do you expect him to respond, with somebody trying to break a traffic rule? So people don't have that manner of approach. So one of the things we also try to tell our friends is, a little bit of understanding and how we actually put out this messaging. But it's really been a very, very terrible and heartbreaking situation. The Lekki killing was just something else on its own. It's really heartbreaking.
Thank you, Donald, and we'll hear a little bit more. Thank you for bringing this into real cases, real situation. We need to, often we lose track of that in the midst of analysis and reading the media. And we need to be reminded these are, on all sides, these are human beings working under and living in very, very difficult conditions and have suffered greatly. And so that's part of our beginning to come to grips with what is the peace building and justice building response in this situation. I do see some questions coming in. Thank you very much. We will hold your questions. I want to turn over to Mark and ask Mark to take us into a little bit more of this discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Carl. Yeah, so like Donald said, gave instances of numerous cases of police brutality that have led up to this point. But let me start by saying that brutality in the Nigerian police is force wide. There are about 13 tactical units with police brutality is not exclusive to SARS. It just so happens that SARS is more known, and they are more brutal because they have a license to operate with a level of, how do I put it, like they don't need to wear uniforms, they don't need to wear name tags, so they have to use that, which is supposed to be a strength in combating violent crime and gathering intelligence to come to thwart crime before it happens, to now turn on innocent citizens. So that's basically the main difference, but it's a force-wide issue. Now, the EndSARS protest itself, the way it started was something that no one saw coming. It's been, but then the anger has been crystallizing for a long time. There have been numerous protests on a smaller scale, a couple of physical protests, but mostly online. These incidences, you have people who come on team who have been extorted at gunpoint, who have been arrested, and basically it's extortion. I have to have a close friend whose brother was arrested and killed extrajudicially many years ago. Their case, one of the most prominent cases so far that's in the news these days. So this has been happening for a number of years, and it just took one incident of a video of a young man who was allegedly thrown out of a car by SARS in a town in Delta State. In the end, the video turned out it was that he jumped out of his car by himself. And there were policemen in the car, even though they were not SARS officers. But because, again, like I said, almost every week there's one case or the other of case of brutality by SARS. It was just the match that it was a spark that ignited the protest, and the protests were really massive. I think since our return to democracy, this has been the largest protest that's ever happened. Not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of number of days. It was really, really sustained. And it's brought a lot of things to the fore. First, it shows a generational gap in Nigeria. Like Dr. Kyle mentioned earlier, Africa has a youth bulge. Nigeria has a huge youth bulge, and you now have there are millions of young Nigerians who are now in their 20s have never experienced military role. So while there's still the hangover of military role in Nigeria, for them it's less pronounced because they did not know what it felt like, and there are also many millions too who were really young during the days of military rule. So for them, they hold less fear than older generations who face a lot of repression during the military dictatorships. So there's that divide in it. So you see a lot of young people who are having to first fight the internal battles in their families against their parents, the older ones. And some of these parents, they do mean well. I mean, I understand they're looking out for young people because they do not want a repeat of what happened in those days where secret police was all over the place and people were scared of speaking up in public or being vocal because they didn't know what will happen next. So that was what it first showed. But then it also showed, secondly, how thin-skinned the government is or the Nigerian political class, because like Ikena said, this is not a particular this administration, it's systemic. But the Nigerian political class is to being criticized. For a very long time, Nigerians are not used to holding their governments accountable. So we vote if we do, and that's it. We have not been able to effectively hold our governments accountable, and it has become so. It was a shocker to have, first of all, millions of or thousands of young people, and in a very traditional society as we have here, where leadership is very ageist, and you're not expected to be able to confront your older ones, to have it that now you're able to come out and then aggressively demand the justice, make clear demands around, the unit should be disbanded, people who are victims should be given justice in these units. There should be reforms of the police, because like Donald said, the police are also in some ways, in many ways, victim of the system, where you have very, very poor conditions of service, very poor salaries, it makes the job is very difficult for them to do their job effectively, very poor training, and it's systemic corruption where they are at the bottom, they're holding the short stick. So all of those things were very, very apparent. Sadly, we saw a situation where people in government or those allied or those who felt their interests were at stake, either because they did not want to see the government being given a bad name, tried to disrupt the protest, sent also the non-state actors who were sponsored to attack the protest. These are all captured on video, with the overt support of sometimes even the police itself, or people who seem to be government agents who were backing these non-state actors. You had the police doing more brutality in the process against police brutality, and then it became the height of it all was when in Lagos the military came into the fray and shot at unarmed protesters, which has now been, which while that was the end of the physical protest, it was also the extent to which these forces went to end this protest. So, because again, like I said, these are protests that's never been of its kind in Nigeria, not just in terms of numbers, in terms of the number of days that it happened, but also in terms of its structure. We kept saying there are no leaders. The government is used to engaging with organized protest, give or take. You engage with organized labor, you engage with groups that have clearly defined structures, your leader, and so on and so forth. This was unlike any of those because there are no leaders. And so there are people that I know, for example, who were called and told, shut down this protest, and they will tell, well, I don't have the power to shut down this protest. And it also reflected the lack of trust that or the amount of vigilance that young people are also taking upon this protest. So that if you as a young person and you feel you're prominent and you get out there and say, let's get in there and let's negotiate with the government, it will be turned on you. And because they have seen so many people use this as a playbook to get into the good graces of government, either to get in there and get paid off, or use that as a fulcrum to launch their own political careers, get into office and repeat more of the same. Because it's interesting to note that a lot of the people in government or in Nigerian political class today, many of them were victims of military dictatorships. Many of them in the 90s were run away, were in exile, fighting no push for democracy from outside the country, or were in and out of detention. And then now they are in the place, in a position to make changes, and they're still repeating the same. So that distrust was one of the reasons why this structure of a leaderless movement was adopted. And yet it was an excellently organized protest. We saw organizing on a scale that's never been done before. Legal, getting protesters wrongly arrested out, medical for those who were injured or for those who unfortunately lost their lives, providing support for their families, communications all across board. It's almost like an alternative informal administration. So, but another thing it has done is that it has revived now post then, while the government on one hand has set up judicial panels of inquiry at the federal level and at least in almost 30 states of the country. It also revived conversation around regulating social media or fake news and hate speech. And while fake news and hate speech are not just a Nigerian problem, but a global phenomenon, a negative global phenomenon, it's the underpin, the drive motivation behind behind this was also to clamp down on speech that is not favorable to the government. So it has now revived, and this is again is not such exclusive to this administration. Over the years, since the rise of social media, we've seen numerous attempts to regulate social media, but in various ways and forms, and each time it hasn't worked. So we have now seen that being revived again and again, and finding all ways to give social media a bad name in order to hang it. We've seen a lot of back and forth between the government and media houses disputing their reports, even when government or the military in this case, for example, has gone back to dispute its own version of events, gone back to correct it, and then belatedly admit what it was accused of and denied initially. So this is still what is still playing out. And while there are no longer physical protests going on, there's still a lot of online protests. There's still a lot of pressure being put on the government by Nigerian citizens, and especially also in Nigerian citizens in diaspora, because Nigerian diaspora community was very, very engaged and still very much engaged. So Nigerians all over the world are still engaged in making sure that the demands of the protests are met.
Thank you so much, Mark, for helping us also not only see what's been happening, but also give us some of the analysis of the background, and particularly the demands of the movement, which are 5 and very important demands that I think are really critical for why people are continuing to go to the streets. And for those who didn't maybe sort of capture those 5 demands, they were immediate release of arrested protesters, justice for victims of police brutality, a prosecution of accused officers, and as Mark mentioned, psychological evaluation and retraining of the police, and then finally, a general salary increase for the police and in their budget to help fight corruption. These are reasonable demands being put before the government. And so part of the challenge is, will the government respond and how will they respond? Thank you for those who've put in important questions. And I want to go into some question time. I do want to reserve at least a minute or 2 for each of the panelists at the end of our Q&A time to talk about their understanding of what the way forward is, the road to peace, and what our role as peace builders and justice builders could be in this situation. So I'm giving you forewarning as the 3 panelists that I will want I'd love a concluding statement from each of you for about a minute at the end of our Q&A time. So I want to turn to some of the questions quickly. First of all, we have a question from John. Is it possible to meet some of these police who I'm assuming have caused some of the atrocities in a safe space? In other words, you're asking already, has there been any attempts to sit down and talk?
Well, can I just expand on the question?
Sure, John.
I was in Nigeria in 1971 in Lagos, and the IofC colleagues of mine, Nigerian, also had a situation with the police where they were very concerned at how they were acting. So they went to a senior man in the police. I've no idea how they got to know him. And they said, we are prepared to offer your police training in integrity, and you can come to our center. And the senior officer was interested. And so when I was there, anyway, about 30 young police officers came, and there was a very lively session, starting with a film, and then there was a discussion, and some of us shared about our own dishonesty, our own struggles with integrity, and it created a really fascinating discussion on the issues that the young police were facing. And the senior policeman was interested by this, and so he said, well, we'll send you 30 every week. And so while I was there, every week 30 police officers arrived, and it was a chance. It was a safe space in which there was real discussion about these things. So anyway, I just felt I'm interested in all, and I can understand the battle in the streets and the demonstrations. Is there some way in which you can reach out in a way that enables you to sit down with some of these people and talk in a way that might bring some new thinking?
If I'll take that, I think, yes, it's very possible to actually reach out to them. I mean, they are humans, and they're also, I mean, everybody wants trust, everybody wants love. Everybody wants, to a large extent, some level of affirmation and association. I mean, there's always that huge campaign of police is your friend. They are not all bad, but somehow I think evil just has a way of amplifying its voice than good. So yes, attempts can be made to actually reach out to them officially, unofficially, and organize some sort of peace cycle where we could actually talk and frame issues and reach better understandings better. So yes, that can be done at various scales.
And I think, thank you, John, for sharing. There's a powerful example of past efforts at this kind of work. And so that's a wonderful example to think about, and to think about what would that look like potentially in our context now. There's a second question: who is supposed to regulate or control the police? I don't know if Robert would like to expound on that a little bit or not, but one of our panelists, maybe that's maybe there's more behind that question than we're reading or seeing. Or not. I think it's an open-ended question.
Okay, Uche, do you want to say something? Okay, so there's a Nigerian Police Complaints Commission that's where citizens are supposed to, you could actually file complaint, of police harassment or police brutality. There's actually a Nigerian Police Complaints Commission. And somehow I can't actually say for sure. I know the website is actually functional and they have like statistics and figures of number of cases. But what we've not heard as a people, which would have kind of like encouraged more citizen complaint, would have been a feedback process of a live feedback process of actually seeing policemen who have violated the law, harassed people, abused people, being arrested. We've not seen that. We've not opened the media page and seen pictures of policemen who have actually abused people go to court, being charged to court. We've not seen that. So there's really no trust. People, you don't even feel safe complaining. I mean, who's going to take your complaint when you look at him and you actually don't trust him to, be able to provide justice for you? So I think it's also that systemic issues. And I think that's why it's engaging would be very, very important for we to kind of like try to reach out and engage, and even in that distrust. But there's a system where people can actually make complaints to, but there's really no trust. You don't expect to see justice as a person, regardless of the international scene, the international voices as regards to the shooting at Lekki. Sincerely, there's no bone in me that it's convinced that we'll get justice. I don't see any military, anybody losing his job. I'm not even talking about going to jail. I don't see anybody resigning. I'm not seeing anybody, any government official, anybody in the military coming up to say, oh, I feel so sad or hurt by this, I'm going to resign my job, I can't be part of this. I don't see that happening. Sincerely, as a person, as a father, as a Nigerian, knowing the system, like I said, everybody is a victim of the situation. So I don't see that happening. The complaint system is there, but we've not seen results from that so far.
Thanks, Donald. Mark, I know your hand is up, so I'd like to give you an opportunity to come in as a panelist here to address any of these questions that you would like to.
Okay, so yeah, so my first response was for John's question around, is there a way to meet with some of the police in a safe space? I know that there's been some work that's been done with some police officers that yielded results. Sadly, it's overwhelmed by the larger systemic problem of the police. So even in meeting with this police in a safe space, as much as it will achieve the most results if we get those who are at the top of the police structure to implement those reforms. Else, those systemic problems will diminish whatever gains are made. To the question around who regulates or who has oversight over the police, besides the police complaints unit Donald mentioned, there's also the Police Service Commission. Problem is, one, the police complaint unit is within the police. So it's supposed to be like in internal affairs somewhat, but the results, what it can pass for results is so minute compared to the amount, the quantum of complaints against the police. And a lot of times it does look like there's also a lot of justification they also provide for some of the excesses of the police, while the Police Service Commission has so far busied itself more with around recruitment and promotion issues of the police and not enforcing disciplinary standards over the police.
Thank you, Mark. And I think that's really important. And this idea of how is the accountability for the police going to be taken into consideration? And I think in many parts of the world, I'm not sure about Nigeria, there's a call now, there's this mistrust that Donald was talking about of the state and its ability to actually hold its own people and instruments accountable. And so there's been a call from communities and people on the ground to say, we need to also find ways that there's like citizen review. In the United States here, we call them citizen review boards, which is the idea of community members also sitting with police to look at police misconduct issues, and that way helping the community to feel some empowerment in that. And so this becomes another challenge and is connected to a number of comments that are flowing in the chat. First of all, I want to thank our friend from Brazil, Ademar, to give us a little bit of the history there. And we see some of the same themes of militarized police, justice institutions that are propagating a racism or certainly a discrimination against marginalized communities of color. And corruption remains a big issue. This is something that we're seeing in many places, as I mentioned, the US, South Africa, now Brazil. We're seeing these same themes of militarization and public violence increasing, state violence increasing also. I want to just, I think, Ademar, you had a question towards the end. Can the lawmakers do something to change the law if it is possible, so no one has been held accountable, taken to court, or been judged? So the question is, can the lawmakers do something to change the law? And I think there has been attempts to change law, and I'd love to hear from any of the panelists who want to talk about the effectiveness of that or not in the Nigerian context.
Okay, let me take that. I'm going to answer this question and the previous one because they are linked together. So because, as Donald mentioned, trust has been lost by the people towards the government, so many things that ought to have been done are not being done. And the EndSARS protest wasn't particularly structured to protest against police brutality alone. Along the line, various other issues began to erupt. People began to protest against the cost of governance. So in relation to who regulates the police, like apart from the police commission and people sending complaints to the Human Rights Commission, we do not see any body, any private body or institutional body that has the sole responsibility of check and balancing the police conduct. That was why amongst the request by the youth during the protest, that we were requesting for, we said they should set up an independent body to oversee the investigation and the prosecution of all reports of police misconduct. Part of the request was for an independent body to be set up, particularly charged with the responsibility of looking into investigations and prosecutions related to police misconduct. So following that, we also had demands by the youth during the protests to reform the institutional reforms, particularly the security, and also constitutional reforms, because the lawmakers are the lawbreakers. They're all, should we say, allegedly the lawbreakers. In most cases, people who make law, they say there's this saying that goes, with great power comes great responsibility. But in some cases, with great power comes great abuse, because there is always cases of abuse of power. Instead of using their power or their position to reform the law for a better society, in most cases, they weaponize this power for their own gains. So currently, I personally do not see any reform being worked towards by the lawmakers at this point in time. The only thing that I see being top on their agenda is the COVID-19 pandemic and how they can crush it, or how the economy has gone into deep recession because of this, or how the vaccine can be made present so that they can go for the antenna. There are so many issues that are taking their priority list, apart from looking into laws that can be amended or brought into place to look into taking care of the people as should be. So people during the protest demanded for public office reforms, because the lawmakers are public office holders and they are not, or we are not seeing anything. We only hear of huge amounts being disbursed for certain things that have to do with making the people or making Nigeria a better place, but we're not seeing any effects being put in place. So we also demanded, or the people also demanded, for the reform of public office, the reform of the institution, the cost of governance, because we heard of cases, or we heard of amounts being earned by our lawmakers, monies that will be used, or that would have been used into looking into the problems of the economy, of the situation, of the society. These monies are being paid in form of allowances and in form of salaries to these lawmakers. So the EndSARS protest also looked into demanding for police reforms, cost of governance, reforming the constitution, reforming the public offices, and also health and youth development. So the lawmakers right now, because of what they are used to, we do not see any law being put in place. We're only hoping that in coming times, when the younger generation or people who want change, genuine change makers, get into places of power, we can now begin to see these things come into place. But for now, the lawmakers are not making any visible, I will use the word visible, because according to them, yes, they are making attempts, but we are not seeing any visible attempt into reforming these laws and putting other laws in place to ensure that these things do not repeat itself and history does not repeat itself again.
Thank you, Uche. And I am aware of the time, and I know that we also started a little bit late. I wonder if I can kindly request that we run for another 10 minutes, if that's acceptable, so that we can finish this conversation. If you need to leave, of course, we understand that, but I wonder if that would be okay if we can continue for 10 more minutes and try to address just a few more questions in this important conversation. Is that okay with folks, with the understanding that you are welcome to leave if you have to have other engagements? And I appreciate your patience on that. There have been a number of things coming in. Let me just back up a little bit. One of the questions was about, from the chat, was from Kirby, and I think it's important that we, let me see, Kirby was first of all curious and interested, and Uche, you spoke to this, I believe, about the idea of what do you think the main shift from SARS, focusing on armed robberies, to then the current behavior of harassing people. I think you addressed that, Uche, in your opening comments. If I may just summarize, and then you tell me if I've done that well. I think what you insinuated in your conversation was that when they were empowered in a new way, and they spread across the country in 21 to now eventually 35 states, they were in all states, they were given new levels of impunity and power to do their work. They were carrying weapons openly and publicly, and so on. They were able to put up roadblocks. There was a whole set of power. They were released in their power parameters, and that's what led to the abuses that are being protested about today. Is that a fair way to say that, Uche?
Yes, that was a very good summary.
Okay. Let me move then quickly to Kirby's second question. Thank you, Kirby, for your questions. These are very important. Kirby is relating to the discussion that's happening in our country here around defunding the police, meaning taking some of the very large budget that goes towards the militarization of the police and moving that into social services, social welfare, community health and healing programs, well-being, and that sort of thing, with the hope that that would be a way in which we could diminish the power and the abuse of that power of our police. Are those conversations happening in Nigeria, or is that two different contexts that we're looking at here? I don't know if one of our panelists would like to jump in to comment on that.
Okay, Mark, would you like to have the space, or should I go ahead?
Okay, let me comment on that. So, well, here in Nigeria, the call is for more funding for the police, but it's also a call for the police accounting for how the funding has been receiving so far, because those two have to go side by side. Well, on one hand, they're not funded enough. Clearly looking at how the poor training, poor remuneration for police officers. There's also a lot of corruption within the police, where there's no accountability for the funding they're getting already. So you see a huge variance between the way that the top people, the police high command leave, and the way those at the bottom rung leave, or it's the difference is so wide. So there needs to be, for us, there needs to be an increase in funding for the police, and there also needs to be an increase in accountability in those and the funds that they have been receiving so far, the funds they will receive.
Yeah. Okay. I think since Mark is having some challenge with his network, I think what Mark is actually saying, the Nigerian police is underfunded in terms of welfare, but the impunity that some of the officers who carry out these extrajudicial acts, it's not coming from the overfunding. It's actually the impunity that comes with how they carry out their work. I mean, you hear something like, I will shoot you here and nothing would happen. I can kill you, nothing will happen to you. So it's because nobody questions them. I mean, they can shoot somebody and he gets posted to some other locations and nobody asks, nobody questions, so it's really about power. It's really about the non-questioning that the system brings. It's really about head of police officers not following up with these cases. It's about we've not seen any police officer, faces of police officers that were arrested, that were sent to court. No police officer has been made example of. So until we start to see the face of 5, 6, 7, 10 police officers after an investigation sent to prison, only until we see that happen, that's when we're going to see change. And we don't want to pretend that somebody is not making gain from all of this. There must be somebody that is making a gain from all of this. When it comes to police brutality, it's always a question of who am I and who are they? You don't hear cases of a politician or a governor's son being harassed. You don't hear that because, I mean, they know who these people are. But an average person, and this is also one of those forces where this EndSARS protest gets its strength from. The average citizen is affected. That person you consider a successful businessman, he's also affected, but he's not a politician and he's not known. So it's really about, it's not really about an ethnic thing. Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, everybody's a victim. The policeman himself is a victim, and the biggest culprit is the system and the big political people on top of it. If they are ready to change it, they will change it. But the police needs an improvement in their welfare. And the truth is, we really need to hear each other, because the youths are saying one thing, they are saying one thing, but the police is hearing something else.
Thank you. That is really important. And I think you've made a call here. And I just want to acknowledge some great information coming in on the chat from our friend from Nagaland, which of course is also one of those communities, those areas, those regions in India that has experienced a great deal of peace and military brutalization from the Indian government. And there's a necessity there for continued discussion. But also what our friend is raising is the idea that the community often has come forward with mediation, negotiation, and the processes of peace building as their tools. And the power has not shifted from the side of the impunity of those with the guns or the organized state militarization. So this becomes our challenge. And I think, Donald, you are opening that right there. I think what we're really wrestling with here is the need for structural change to be seen and felt by people on the ground, grassroots people on the ground, the communities. And at the same time, there's a strong need for the communities and the state and the actors of the state to come into conversation with each other. Because unless there's that trust building, unless there's that relationship building, that conversation, unless there's an ability to have enough contact or encounter to in fact hold each other accountable in this process, the state and the civilian society will remain in a power imbalance that will continue to produce violence. And so I think that's critical and something that we want to keep emphasizing, and that is the personal transformation and the structural transformation must come together if we're going to see a sustained and durable peace process. There are other questions. I'm going to have to close us down at this point, and I really would like to hear a sentence or two, because I know this has been a hard conversation and we could be in this conversation for many hours, but I'd love to hear each of our panelists, the three panelists, share a little bit of their vision. Let me say vision. A statement of their hope of what could be transformed, what could happen, and whether they have hope about their role in this process. So if we can go in the order that we originally started with Uche, I would welcome that. How do you see the road of peace ahead? What is critical for moving forward?
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Carl. So moving forward, I personally think the government should start by stop denying, because we've had a series of denials coming from the end of the government as to certain occurrences that have happened. The people are willing to listen. They are willing to give the government time, because change is not effected in one day. Rome wasn't built in a day. It's a gradual process. So the people are willing to give the government time to effect good changes in the society. But when the government keep denying certain things happened right under our faces, we all saw it, the world saw it. Even CNN is reporting it. International media has carried it. It's everywhere on social media, and the government still keeps denying from one step to another. You know, it's very hurtful, and it crushes the hope that we have. But for someone like me that believes in change, no matter how bad the situation is, I believe that change can still be effected, albeit it may take a while, but it's going to happen. So the government, we could start by the government to stop denying, and also people like ourselves, the young people, Donald, myself, and Mark, could look into being part of the government. You can't just sit on the other side all the time. So I think we should look into being a part of lawmakers and change makers and policy reform people to see how we can effect change in the future, because it's not about now, it's what happened in 10 years time, 20 and 30 years time, generations to come, and it's going to start now. So I believe that people with genuine intentions like myself, Donald, Mark, could take the bolder step by belonging to politics. We should join politics. If we want change, we need to be the change we want to see in the world. So we can start effecting that change by being part of the change makers and the policy makers and the lawmakers, and see how we can infiltrate this camp with our good intentions. That is what I think should be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Uche. We appreciate your courage. Donald?
I think Uche has said it very well. Truth is very, very necessary for people to heal. But I don't think the government would give that. I mean, I don't think the government will come out and suddenly be truthful. They've gone to way far lies. So I'm not expecting the government to bring that, but I trust the Nigerian people. The heart of an average Nigerian is golden, so we would forgive. We would forgive whether the government acts or not. We would not forget, but we would forgive. And just like Uche has said, we would always reach out, because even if we don't see human in the government, we'll see human in the Nigerian police. We would try to reach out to their hearts and try to let them know we feel their pain. I think one of the things I learned from the whole protest and I cried about was that we spoke for them. but they heard something else. You know, if the police actually heard us, maybe they wouldn't have, the army wouldn't have released their bullets on us. So we would reach out to them. We'll continue to see the Nigerian police as human, and we'll reach their hearts. For the government, we'll leave them to live in their lives. We'll see them as structures, and we'll try to see how we can change those structures. We would heal without the truth. We will learn to heal without the truth and forgive them even when they don't deserve it.
Thank you, Donald. And I know that's tough, and I appreciate your work on the front lines. I appreciate the sacrifices you have made. I appreciate the fact that you have been poured out in this work. And so we salute you in the work that you're doing. Mark?
For me, like I said earlier, this has been a process led mostly by thousands and maybe millions of young Nigerians who have a generation of Nigerians who never experienced military dictatorship. And it's also been like a political awakening for those many young Nigerians. My best hope from here is I share somewhat in Donald's skepticism about people being held accountable from the protest itself. But my hope is that we build up on this momentum to do many different things that will change the course of Nigerian politics and the direction in which this country goes. Where I've seen many young people becoming eager to basically become registered as voters, to understand how the political system works, to find out how can they partake in making change at the national, from the national level to the granular local level. This is kind of organizing. We want to see more and more, and that will actually, because for many people they now realize it's more than just police brutality. It's about not just because of governance, it's about having a political system that works for everybody, having a country that works for everybody, one, where there's a rule of law, where there are policies and law and projects that benefit everyone. We can't all emigrate from Nigeria and move elsewhere. I mean, look at our share population. So there's that eagerness to get in there and see how, even if taking up Uche's advice, even if we all can run for office or get into government, how can we be active citizens and contribute to changing Nigeria? That for me is my best hope, that this momentum that has been generated is built upon by as many people as possible in many different ways. And that's the beauty of a movement. A movement doesn't need people to sit in a room and determine in which way everyone should go, but it's giving a foundation and a fulcrum for people to use their initiative and run with it in the best ways they can.
Thank you, Mark. I do know there were some other questions and comments throughout. Thank you very much. Ismaela, you sent a really important question on asking about reflecting on the similarities between the Black Lives Movement here in this country and also the movement in Nigeria. And I wish we had time to go into that conversation more deeply. But I think what I'm hearing here in this country, as well as in many other countries, is a call for truth-telling. As Donald had said, the youth are asking for truth from the generations before. And the second is accountability. And the third is healing. So it's a powerful message of truth, accountability, and healing. What we don't know is what the structures of governance should look like in order to enhance those processes, to be catalysts of those processes. That's where our imagination and creativity and innovation is required, because that's new territory for our state institutions and for our institutions of society that have often gone the direction of violence, force as a means of change. And the call is to end that and to think about other ways in which we can change as people and societies. Thank you for all of you being here with us. I'm going to turn it back. We appreciate the questions and the conversation. I'm going to turn it back to Yitka and Eliana. Thank you very much. And I hope this will continue to spark conversation from here.
Thank you so much, Carl. Thank you also to our alumni, Donald, Mark, Uche. It was great to be part of this conversation. We know that we only scratched the surface of this specific conversation about what is happening with police brutality in Nigeria and what are the demands of people in the country. as well as on the similarities, as Carl just shared, of this situation of police brutality in different countries and how it's affecting communities locally, and what does that mean for peace building, activism, human rights, police reform, and in general, the role of government in the process. We thank you very much for your participation. We will appreciate if you can take also some time to respond to our Mentimeter. This really helps us to better learn how to tailor these activities online for all of you. And I really want to thank all of you for being here, and we wish you a lovely rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here.